Hello? Can you all hear the piano all right? Wonderful. I'm sure most of you already know me, but in case you don't, my name is Riedy. I'm the organist and choir master here at St. Gabriel's. And you may also know that I am a student at Moravian University. I'm currently in my senior year, my last semester actually, of a music theory and German studies double major. And as part of my sort of senior concluding projects and activities, one of the things I'm putting on is a senior recital. This recital is going to be in 2 weeks on March 29th. And if you are interested in that, I would really, especially if you like what I play here, I would really recommend you come. We have a really beautiful performance space, Pater Hall. We have a wonderful Steinway Grand in there. It's going to be really beautiful. But I also just thought it would be really lovely to go ahead and give you all a preview of what I'm playing in my recital. And especially since this is somewhat of a more familiar atmosphere, I can talk with you all. It can be sort of conversational. So yeah, the first piece that I'll be playing is the first movement from Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata. I'm sure everyone here has heard the name Beethoven. That might not be true for all the composers I'm playing, but I'm sure you've heard maybe Ode to Joy, you've heard the fifth, da, 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 da. And the Pathetique is a sonata of his that does get played quite a bit. The second movement especially is really popular. Something else you might know about Beethoven is that he went deaf during his lifetime. And what's really interesting about this particular sonata is that it was written sort of in the period when he just realized that he was starting to go deaf. So this sonata was written 1798. He was a 28-year-old man there, living in Vienna, the capital of the Austrian Empire. And he wrote a letter to his brothers a couple years later called the Heiligenstadt Testament, where he talks about going deaf, and he talks about all of the emotional turmoil he's going through, all of the different doctors who's going to, they're saying, oh, do this, and nothing's working. So this is a really dramatic time in his life, and he's experiencing a lot of emotions. And this really comes through in this sonata. So pathetique here, it doesn't mean pathetic in the sense we usually think in English, but it really means with emotion, with feeling. And as a composer, Beethoven was, at the time, revolutionary and really imbuing his music with his own emotions and just filling it with what he was feeling and making it a very stark presentation. So you can really hear that come through in this movement. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This next piece is going to be from Johann Sebastian Bach. And this is going to be the Prelude and Fugue in C minor from the Well-Tempered Clavier. Now, this piece, the Well-Tempered Clavier as a set, was assembled in 1722. And in Bach's life, this is actually a really important time. This is right before he makes the move to Leipzig, where he's going to work as the Kapellmeister at the Thomaskirche for the next 27 odd years of his life, the most fruitful period of his life. The term well-tempered clavier gives us an indication as to how this was heard at the time it was performed, because the way that we tune the piano and all other instruments today is very different from what they had back in the 1700s. Back then, they had what was called a tempered system, or it's differently tempered. And what that means is, rather than the distance between every note being relatively the same, some notes would have a larger or smaller distance in between them than others. And so what that meant is that every key actually had its own unique sound. Of course, in the modern system, if you play in any key, all of the intervals are technically the same. So there's no, if I play a perfect fifth in C major or an E flat or an F sharp or whatever, it's all technically the same relationship harmonically. Now, in the earlier systems, which you have in the Middle Ages, something like four common mean tone temperament, what that means is C major sounds really good. And the further you get from C major, the worse it sounds. And you get some really awful sounding tuning systems the further out you get. By the time they'd gotten to Bach, they had developed systems where every key at least was usable. And what this meant really is not just that keys sounded different, but every key really had its own different meaning. Nowadays, a lot of people still like to talk as if different keys have different moods or whatever, but they really, really did back then, because the intervals were literally different. And this particular set of pieces, the Well-Tempered Clavier, is really remarkable for being the first set, a full set of compositions in all 24 major and minor keys. So Bach was really showing like, hey, I can make full use of the entire tonal palette. It was really out of the ordinary. This particular prelude and fugue, the prelude opens in the toccata style. You have a melody which is sort of just tapped out in the top of the right hand, and then just a flurry of notes in the middle. And then you get to the fugue, which is just sort of a very typical Baroque dance style. Thank you. Thank you. This next one is from a composer named Alexander Scriabin. Maybe we're getting into names that people aren't familiar with now. Um, Scriabin was a Russian composer towards sort of between the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. Um, and he wrote mostly for piano, although his most famous work is perhaps Prometheus, which is a work for orchestra. The really notable thing about Scriabin is that when he started writing music in the late 1880s, early 1890s, he was writing really in a very typical idiom. He was very much inspired by Chopin. You might know the Chopin Nocturne in E flat. It's a very famous, very lovely piece. Scriabin was very much influenced by Chopin, and a lot of his earlier piano works sound like they could have come straight from Chopin. Um, However, as he got later into his life, he began to sort of drift from that earlier idiom. And a lot of that was because he got interested in this very sort of esoteric occult thing called theosophy. Um, and he sort of started to develop some strange philosophical beliefs. Um, and basically, what that led to is he developed his own harmonic system completely different from anything that had ever come before, which really was very influential in a lot of the later Russian and then early Soviet artists. Unfortunately, that style was then really sort of suppressed when Stalin implemented the official policy of Soviet realism. But Scriabin in those later works was really influential on some of his contemporaries in the younger generation. Now, this piece I'm playing is the Prelude Opus 16, number 1. Um, Scriabin, like Chopin and also like Bach, who we just heard, wrote a set of pieces in all 24 major and minor keys. That is the Opus 11 Preludes. Now, he originally planned to write another set of 24 preludes in all the major minor keys, but he did not end up finishing this goal. And so all of the sort of aftermath of that ended up being published in a couple of later opuses, one of which is this piece we'll be playing today. This is a really lovely lyrical piece. There's a left-hand melody that's sort of subtle, but it sort of calls out, it sings out throughout the piece, and it really shows the nuance and subtlety that Scriabin put into a lot of the left-hand parts, in large part because he actually injured his right hand while studying at the Moscow Conservatory. He originally wanted to be a concert pianist, wasn't able to, then really got into composing. So this is Prelude Opus 16, number 1. Thank you very much. This next piece is by a composer named Leopold Godowsky. And especially if you are a pianist, you may know and fear his name because he wrote a simply monumental series of studies on the Chopin etudes. Now, the Chopin etudes are already hard enough as they are. Etude literally means study in French. They're meant to be challenging pieces to be played by a developing musician in order to strengthen their technique. Godowsky looked at these already quite hard pieces and thought, these aren't hard enough. Um, and especially in the left hand, many of his reworkings are simply either taking the right hand part and putting it in the left hand or just writing the piece for only left hand. He had just a phenomenal technique. Now, these are a really impressive set of studies, but what's really unfortunate about them is that they often tend to overshadow Godowsky's original compositions, many of which are really quite lovely. One set of such compositions is the Java Suite. Godowsky was a bit of a globetrotter, as he called himself, and he really loved to travel all around the world and experience a lot of different cultures, get to meet a lot of different people. And one of the places that he went to is the island of Java, which is today a part of Indonesia. Um, Now, he originally intended to write a whole bunch of sets of pieces detailing sort of all of these different locations he went to. Um, However, it seems that he was so enamored with just the island of Java that he only actually ended up composing that set, the Java Suite. The piece I'll be playing today is from this set. It's called Gamelan. If you're familiar with gamelan music, you'll know that that is the sort of native orchestra, if you want to call it that, of many of the Indonesian islands. And in his preface to this set, Godowsky talks about hearing the gamelan for the first time. And many composers were sort of influenced by the gamelan. Debussy heard it um, and was inspired by that in a lot of his music. A lot of other composers were as well. Godowsky, in this particular piece, he's not necessarily trying to recreate the gamelan, but he's sort of trying to recreate the impression of it, the experience of hearing it, but through his own ears who are used to Western music, you know. Um, Now, it is worth mentioning this was 1925. He went to the island in 1923. And unfortunately, Godowsky does have a little bit of an attitude that we might consider a little problematic today. He describes the Javanese as a quaint and docile people. He calls the island mysterious and strange. These are things that we maybe wouldn't say nowadays. But he is very reverent of their culture. He clearly thinks very highly of their music. He talks a lot about their other arts as well. And I think this is just a very beautiful piece of music. So I hope you'll enjoy. Thank you so much. This last piece for today is from the Argentinian composer Alberto Ginastera. Ginastera is one of my personal favorite composers. It was me discovering his music that led me to really get interested in classical music, and especially classical music of the 20th century. And this particular piece is the last movement from his first piano sonata. Now, Ginastera he grouped his own music into three periods. He has the objective nationalist period, where he was really heavily influenced by the native music of his native Argentina. He was born in Buenos Aires. And you get a lot of piano works. You have his first two ballets that are there, some other pieces. Moving on, you get into a subjective nationalist period. Now, in this period, he says that he still is influenced and inspired by these cultures, but he's beginning to develop his own language. He's beginning to put his own spin on things. He's beginning to experiment with different techniques that are becoming popular in sort of global contemporary music. Now, his latter period is neo-expressionism. That's when he's just completely severed ties with the original. He's living in like Switzerland now, and um, so this particular piece comes from his subjective nationalist period. And I think the clearest indication of that influence is the heavily rhythmic nature of this piece. You're going to hear right from the outset. It is extremely percussive. It is very rhythmic. It's very motivically driven. It's really a perpetual machine that, with very few exceptions, just marches all the way through to the end with a really exciting rhythm. Especially, it has a very odd time signature of 3/8 equals 6/16, which actually means that every measure you are changing in between having two large beats and three smaller beats. It's a really unique effect that I've seen maybe a handful of their composers do, but really Gina Stara is one of the leaders in this technique. Um, this particular piece um, was actually commissioned. Oh, I'm forgetting who's commissioned. That's bad. But I remember its first performance was in Pittsburgh, actually. Um, and it was selected for a performance of international music in Oslo in 1953. And this is one of the pieces that really helped to begin to bolster Gene Starr's international reputation. So that whole thing is really lovely. I wish I could play the whole thing for you today, but for now I just have the fourth movement. So thank you all so much for listening. I hope that you have enjoyed the music. I hope you enjoyed my ramblings a little bit. And yeah, thank you very much. Gina Stara's First Piano Sonata, last movement.